Greetings, allies. It's Monday, November 18th, 2019, and this is your Cup of Jones, a very special Cup of Jones. We're not going to be going through lots of business updates at the top. We're going to go through the schedule when I'm done talking about what I'm about to talk about, but we need to talk about a post that we made this morning announcing that we are going to be joining the Roost Sales Network. That I think is very pertinent to you patrons and is obviously very pertinent to people that are podcast sponsors, Frame Trap sponsors, and of course our lovely mega sponsor ViewSonic this month. But I think for most people actually following Easy Allies might not be something that they really notice or really changes things. But all of you are patrons, and especially you listening to this or watching this are patrons who enjoy Cup of Jones. So I think this is very pertinent information to you if you are very focused on the day-to-day business goings-on of Easy Allies, and specifically our bottom line, like how we make money, how we invest in Easy Allies, and how that in turn affects the content that we produce. So lots to talk about right at the top. I'm not going to do an editorial today because this is kind of the editorial right at the top. It'd be silly to just be like, hey, so let's talk about Disney Plus at the end of this. This is definitely an episode of Cup of Jones dedicated, not donated, not doing any donations today, dedicated to talk about this Roost announcement. Thank you much for joining us. Cheers. Okay, so this is something that we talked about for a long time at Easy Allies, and is something that we talked about. It's Mickey Mouse's birthday, apparently, according to chat. Wonderful. And something that we've talked about specifically, with Roost ever since this opportunity first became available. We have dealt with, we've worked with them for a long time. There's a lot of steps involved in making this happen, and there are a lot of steps involved in making this happen moving forward. So even though if you listen to the podcast, if you follow us on Patreon, you will see changes starting next month and moving forward in the months ahead of that. We have never worked with Roost before. We have never worked with a sales network before. We, since the inception of Easy Allies, have primarily done all of our sponsorship stuff through our Patreon. And so that's going to be changing. And so even though, again, you will see changes right away, this is something that is going to take a couple months to just kind of smooth out all of the transition, to answer a lot of questions that people have. I will try to address as many of those as possible before we move on into business questions today. But to basically start from scratch, we are joining what is called the Roost. It is a sales network run by Rooster Teeth. We are not joining Rooster Teeth. Rooster Teeth will have absolutely no ownership or say in any of the content we produce at Easy Allies. That is so very important to us, as is apparent from comments that we've gotten, just chat scrolling by before I went live today. There were definitely comments from people who were like, "Hey, I hope this means that I hope this does not mean that Rooster Teeth is somehow creatively involved in Easy Allies." They are not. I can tell you certainly from my perspective, and I can tell you, based on working with the other allies for 3.5 years now, our independence, our control over a creative product is, I would say, maybe one of the main reasons we do this whole thing. One of the major changes that happened since we moved away from Defy Media and then Viacom before that at Game Trailers, the feeling of not having what can maybe delicately put as corporate overlords is a wonderful thing, and is something that we very much cherish and has incredible value. Something we also value is bringing in the right people to work on something that we recognize we are not terribly good at, and something that we don't necessarily have an interest in getting better at. There are some things that we have had to do. There are lots of hats that I personally have had to wear ever since Easy Allies started. There are lots of wonderful business lessons that I have learned that I will take into other enterprises and other business ventures if I get the chance to do those later in life. But it's been a very interesting journey, and some of those things I have learned and done and then thought, wow, that was really great. I'm excited to do that again and get better at it. Some of those things I've done and thought, wow, that wasn't fun. I maybe want to pass that off to another ally, or maybe get somebody else involved, see if they can help out with that. Or maybe that's, in the case of incorporating our business, doing a lot of business stuff that is handled on the back end. Again, very Cup of Jones relevant information, stuff that if you just go to our YouTube channel, if you just listen to our podcast, not only are you not made aware of a lot of this information, a lot of this stuff happens behind the scenes, but you're probably not that interested. You don't necessarily need to see how things are cooked up. You just want to eat the delicious meals served here at Easy Allies. And sponsorships were one of those things. When we started, Easy Allies was very easy, pun intended, to just set up Patreon tiers to handle all of our sponsorships. So, to set up our $250 tier for Frame Trap, to set up our $500 tier for the Easy Allies podcast, and then eventually our $700 tier for a mega sponsor across both of those podcasts. And the benefit of that was it was just very easy to set up. It was as easy to set up as other tiers, and it was easy to communicate. There was a nice call to action on the podcast and on Frame Trap, because once you heard about those things and heard about, hey, these sponsorships sound fun, I would like to have the Easy Allies community know about my webcomic, or know about the fact that I make custom keys for cars and whatnot. Or if you just want to do a shout out to a charity, or we've just had wonderful people like Mango and Elthanis who just said, I would like to support you at the absolute highest level that I can. So it was easy for us to set up. And I think one of the biggest benefits, and I think something that I've heard from a lot of people that is going to change when we move forward with Roost, and will be unfortunate, is it feels great, talking about Hogue. It feels great, saying just names like Beaten Down Brian and Mango. It feels great to have kind of mom and pop sponsors. It separates us from other podcasts. I remember when we first started out, that was definitely something that I took pride in, that our sponsors are different. If you tune into, some of my favorite podcasts, Radiolab, This American Life, The Moth, a lot of those have very similar sponsors. You start to recognize companies that go after these big sales networks, and there is a bit of repetition amongst those companies in hearing, I'm not going to call any of them out specifically by name, but you probably know them, like companies that you are familiar with that like to advertise on as many different podcasts as they can. Or if you tend to have a preference, if you tend to only listen to gaming podcasts or a certain type of podcasts, those sponsors want to reach you. They want their message to be heard by you, and so it's not a surprise that those sponsors tend to follow you throughout the content that you enjoy, if that content tends to have similar themes. So I think that probably for me is the number one thing that I will miss moving forward. The number one thing that was a difficult decision, not only just going with Roost, but going with any sales network, was the fact that there would be kind of a sameness, and not necessarily that direct, emotional connection to not only names that you recognize, names that you would only know through the Easy Allies podcast, but in a lot of senses, names that you see again pop up on Cup of Jones, see pop up on our live streams, see pop up on people that are engaged on Patreon, that are commenting on things. It does feel kind of warm and fuzzy to see those names pop up at these incredibly high sponsorship levels, going and addressing a lot of these people to notify them of the fact that we're going to be making this Roost transition. Afforded me the opportunity to see some of these people and the incredible financial contributions that they've made over the years. And again, these are not massive companies, that are trying to get their word out. These are people that believe in our message, that believe in Easy Allies, that want to support us. And we will always be extremely grateful for them. And we want to keep working with them in the future, which is why we're going to continue having a tier that basically supplies a shout out to those people that will be on not only the Easy Allies podcast and on Frame Trap, but on multiple podcasts. And so we will always, give a shout out to those people that we recognize are, top tier sponsors, top tier patrons, purely financially, people that, see what we do, that want to be engaged. And again, a lot of these people are like, if you have to say my name, then say my name, but I really just want to support you at this level. And we're incredibly appreciative for that. But specifically, let's talk about Roost and how it'll work. So again, Rooster Teeth will have absolutely no creative say in anything that we do at Easy Allies, even just the podcasts. The way that this has been working moving forward is we are provided a massive list of sponsors, and we are completely able to say, hey, we don't want that sponsor. We don't think, we might potentially have a problem with that company. We don't think that's a good fit for our audience because, Roost is very knowledgeable. And that's another thing too, when we switched real estate agents. We had one real estate agent that wasn't working out when we got an office, and then we got another one, and then immediately out of the gate, this person was like, oh, you're a YouTube channel. Well, I understand how that works. I understand what your needs are. You're crowdfunded, you're creating content for a very specific audience, and you want a space to do that. And I mean, the things just changed night and day when we got someone involved in what we were doing that not only was good at their job, but understood who we were and understood, why we are doing business with those people. And Roost feels exactly like that. These are people that are not only providing services for other podcasts, but providing services for other podcasts that I like to think there's nothing like Easy Allies, but are very similar to us in theme, in message, in content. And so that feels very good. That not only are the sponsors that they're serving up for us catered, specifically for our needs, but even among those sponsors, we are able to select, sponsors that we want. So we are given a fair amount of freedom in that moving forward. And as I said, starting in December, you will see that change. It is our goal actually to not, with the exception of adding the shout out tier to our podcasts, to not change the structure of how we do things. Again, Kyle and I are the producers of the Easy Allies podcast, and so we want to keep Podcast Halftime as the sponsored segment. Of course, Ben and Damiani and Ian on Frame Trap and Friend Code and Reaction Shots, respectively, might choose to change up how they do things with these sponsors moving forward. But we want to make this as invisible as possible to people who are just watching us. So there are no, Metal Gear exclamation points that pop up. There's no curiosities or concerns that come up from this. This just seems kind of like a natural business decision. Early access will function the same for all of our podcasts, but $1 patrons will get the ad-free version on Sundays. And that will be a change from that early post on the weekend. So if you want, if you're curious to get that ad-free version will be delivered via Patreon. And you will basically go back to the initial Patreon post, and then you will get that ad-free version. And that's very exciting. A little bit more work for me as a podcast editor, for everyone else producing podcasts. But if you are a patron of Easy Allies, just at that $1 level, you will get ad-free versions of all of those podcasts. And so it's fun. It's neat. Not only does, Roost understand our business and understand, why we would seek out a company like this and why we would want to work with them, they understand that there could possibly be some nervous jitters amongst the community when big changes like this happen. As I mentioned at the top, we really celebrate our independence, and I'm sure all of you do too. And so, that's definitely something that we want to celebrate and enforce moving forward, and they completely understand that. And so that was not something that we went to Roost and said, we want ad-free podcasts. That's something that they told us we could do. We were like, oh, that's fantastic. Roost will also be handling our merchandise moving forward. And that's a big step because I feel that's something that we've kind of handled on our own, and we've gotten a lot of complaints over the life of, Easy Allies that... and the $5 version is the ad-free version as well. Thank you, Bloodworth, just to clarify that. Bloodworth hopefully has my back because I'm rattling off a little bit of information. And so if you have any questions, direct that at myself and Bloodworth. And of course, let's keep this conversation going. I don't want to, move into Cup of Jones next week and be like, okay, we already talked about that Roost thing. Like this is something that is going to evolve our business. And I want to answer as many questions as we can moving forward. If I'm not clear about something or if I need to reiterate something. What the heck was I talking about? Merch. And so it might be a little slow going moving forward, but it's going to be really exciting, kind of like our relationship with Fangamer, where we reached out to a company. They had artists that worked with them that were going to create new merch for us, and we had ideas, and we basically collaborated on a couple of projects. But we were, again, just like Roost, we were, as far as ad sales are concerned, we were working with a company that they're like, this is what we do. If this is not something that, you are incredibly inspired by, or something that, obviously, I think we wake up, day in, day out, every week, every month, and focus primarily on our content. And there are a lot of things around that could help our business, and just stuff that, tends to sometimes get put on the back burner. And so as we move forward, we want to bring in the right smart people to be involved in these things. So we're really excited. Again, there might not be a ton of offerings at first, as far as merch is concerned, but moving forward, we've seen what, they have done with a lot of different brands that we enjoy. And we're very excited to work with them. Unfortunately, that means that, while we can continue to sell our inventory on Spreadshirt and Fangamer, we're not allowed to make new inventory, and we're going to be moving over to Roost, which means you're going to get a bunch of brand new cool Easy Ally shirts. But if that sparks a concern for you, and you think, oh wait, I never actually made a point to go and get that Fangamer shirt or that Spreadshirt, then you should go do that. You should go do that soon, before, you know, we basically hit that point when we make that transition for merch. So that's something that you know, I have a little bit of concern that would be frustrating with people because I know people have wanted us to do more with merchandise, and I know that, you know, moving away from some of the outlets that we've had, you know, providing merchandise for all of you seems a little bit counterproductive. But the hope is that, you know, moving forward, just as in how this will affect our day-to-day business, how this will affect our bottom line. Hopefully in the future, this will mean that you get more updates than you ever have concerning merch. You'll get more high quality merch. You'll get more merchandise that seems exciting and seems more like, you know, represents us as a company in similar ways that you've seen other people, pretty much almost anyone in this industry who does merch better than we do. Okay, so let's go through. I kind of rambled a little bit, but I want to go through the list here. $1 patrons will have access to ad-free, right? Early access will function the same, adding the shout-out tier. This, as we mentioned in the post, this absolutely does not replace our need for your support. I definitely want to make that clear. This is changing a lot of stuff on the back end. This is changing a lot of stuff in terms of how we, you know, do our business, how we get. It's nice that I've stopped writing out all of our sponsor stuff on cards, and I've been using my phone and the Easy Allies podcast to read off sponsors, because that's how I will be doing it in the future. I'll be accessing an app, and then that app will have all of the ad reads, and so you will see me on my phone reading all of the ad reads every week. I definitely want to give a huge shout out to Ian Hink, who has been pretty much on the forefront. Obviously, Bloodworth is always, you know, Bloodworth is everywhere. Bloodworth is always working on everything at all times. But Ian has definitely, you know, put himself forward in working with them, and has been communicating with them a lot. Ian is going to be one of those the primary people that is deciding, you know, what sponsors are good for Easy Allies, and then, you know, bringing those to us, and then we'll ultimately as a group make those decisions. But Ian's done just an absolute tremendous amount of work on this, so thank you very much, Ian. And just kind of, I skipped over this a little bit, but I just kind of want to talk about the benefit for Easy Allies in terms of, you know, I talked about how easy it was, you know, to set up our sponsorship Patreon tiers, and how it's going to be really nice moving away from those, because there were a lot of things about doing, you know, sponsors through Patreon that were a little bit clunky. One was, you know, if people like, you know, ViewSonic, if people like Uniqlo reached out to us, you know, they had to become patrons. They had to go to patreon.com and sign up. And as you all know, with your, comments that disappear from the community showcase and Cup of Jones, Patreon doesn't always work, you know, the way we want it to work. And we have this, you know, outside, you know, entity that is not only, you know, handling this financially, but specifically handling sponsorship stuff. And because we had these giant tiers, because we had a $700, $500, and $250 tier, anytime people would leave those tiers, which was completely understandable. You know, sometimes we had people that just came in for a month. What's been really great, as I mentioned before, is sometimes we would promote a podcast or a webcomic, promote something that, you know, these people don't have a massive advertising budget. And so it's nice to talk about them for just a month, but they would sign on with a complete understanding that they wouldn't be there the next month. But it always created kind of a desperate situation near the end of the month for that person to then back out of that slot of, you know, being associated with the Frame Trap or Easy Allies podcast. And then we would have to get a new sponsor to come in and fill that slot. And that got progressively more difficult as time went on with this podcast. Not only that, but I saw a lot of people that expressed concerns over our Patreon dipping by $1,000, $1,500, which was the decision of literally just a handful of patrons. But when you just see that bottom line go up and down, it created a little bit of emotional turmoil in our community. And I completely understand that, because, you know, in a lot of ways, you're really looking at that top number and really using that as a measurement of the success of Easy Allies. And obviously we get, you know, income from all over the place. We get income from merch. We get income from YouTube. We get income from Twitch. You know, we have donations. We do fundraisers every now and then. So there's lots of different ways that you can contribute to Easy Allies. But, you know, we are known, you know, very much so as a Patreon, as a successful Patreon. And so us hitting that 50K goal, and then now, you know, sitting somewhere around 47, 48K, might seem like things are not going as well as they have previously at Easy Allies, which could not be farther from the truth. And so we don't want that, you know, musical chairs setup of how we do sponsors to indicate how successful we are at Easy Allies, especially because there are so many, income sources that we have on the back end that you don't necessarily see those metrics every month, that rest assured mean that we are doing very fine. We are doing well at Easy Allies. Again, we will always need your support via Patreon. We definitely want you to be engaged. We definitely want to reward our community for those people that are a part of our Patreon. My PC just tried to go to sleep. Stop doing that. Sorry. Soulcaster asks a very good question. Out of curiosity, will these ads be ad reads or videos? These will be ad reads. These will be just us while the podcast is actually going on doing these ad reads. We might have a logo or something, or art brought in, depending on what sponsor is available. But these will just be ad reads. Hopefully, Blood confirmed they will hopefully work very similar to how they worked in the past. That is our goal moving forward. Because there is this dip, because those sponsorship tiers are so substantial, moving forward with Roost and taking away those sponsorship tiers will incur another dip in our Patreon, which is why we want to communicate to all of you, why we want to communicate to as many people in our audience as possible that this is happening, because when that dip happens, which could be a $2,000, $3,000 dip, that is representative of how our support happens through Patreon, but is not emblematic at all of our bottom line, because we will now be getting that money through Roost. And so it'll be a little bit of a tricky transition, and especially interesting given that we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of moving into the studio. And so it's tricky when communicating these things, to a crowdfunded audience, to an audience that supports us through Patreon, because it can, if you look at things in black and white, it can be very easy to assume that any sort of dips in our Patreon are bad for our overall business, bad messaging, bad for momentum, bad for, they seem bad for our growth. But we have exhaustively, considered this decision. We've gone through what feels like almost every logistical loophole that we would need to figure this out. And at the end of the day, we feel that this is not only going to be as good as doing our sponsorships the way that we did before, but will possibly benefit us even more on two fronts that potentially matter most in terms of doing anything for Easy Allies: financially and workload. So it'll mean that we have to do less work in going out and incentivizing other people to become patrons, possibly incentivizing our patrons. Somehow I got the feeling sometimes that some patrons upped their pledge to $250 or $500 just because they felt bad that there weren't other sponsors. And that's, again, I'm incredibly grateful for that support, but I don't want that pressure. I don't want you to feel, and we think and we sense, and we have actually seen a lot of evidence on this across from all of our different channels, that there seems to be kind of a settling in on our Patreon, which is fantastic. I think there were a lot of people that donated at a level that might have been a little bit outside their comfort zone. And then now, as Easy Allies is going on, and as we, are in the studio, and you can see what a blast we're having in the studio and how comfortable we are, with the status of Easy Allies, that people are starting to drop maybe down from a $10 tier to a $5 tier, down from $5 to $1, or especially from $500 down to one of the lower tiers. And that's great. We definitely want people... We want you all to be in for the long haul. We want Easy Allies to be a sponsorship that you don't look at your budget every month and go, oh, Easy Allies. We want this to be something that you feel confident in, something that comfortably fits into your budget. And hopefully this will help us do that. This will take, so much strain off of, the need to have these high tier sponsors, to have these, to have such a substantial percentage of our Patreon number come in strictly just through not only a small number of tiers, but a small number of patrons. And so I think that will be something that will benefit us in the long run, but will definitely raise some eyebrows when that number drops. There definitely be some people that have not heard about this Roost change, that don't know how sponsorships are going to be moving forward, that hear these strange names coming up that they don't recognize on the podcast, that see our bottom line dipping just a little bit on Patreon. And I think in the long run, what that means is not only that total number that we have on Patreon is much more representative of how many patrons we have, how much all of them feel comfortable donating, but how much that number then grows. Then if that number drops, to 44, 45, if that number can get back up to 50, that doesn't necessarily represent a us stressing out our patrons, a sort of desperation amongst, the more affluent of our community, supporting us in ways that may be, possibly beyond their means. But it actually represents true growth at this company, actually represents us not having 9,000 patrons, but possibly 10,000 patrons someday. Us actually creating new tiers that people really want to engage in, actually seeing the difference of, possibly someday in the future, adding a $2 tier, adding an $8 tier, adding more options for people to slowly up their pledge, move up that pledge ladder in comfortable ways, because we want this entire thing, to be comfortable. We want our community to be comfortable supporting us, and we want to know that we feel comfortable doing what we do. I don't think any of us really ever felt comfortable handling sponsors. It was always something that we knew was not a perfect system. And frankly, maybe this is like the last thing that I'll say before we move on to business questions and we look at this week's schedule. As I mentioned, just something that we're not, particularly good at. We were kind of underselling ourselves. And that was a hard thing to know when we started the Easy Allies podcast and when we started Frame Trap and when we started Easy Allies, was how much are we worth? This not in the terms of us like wanting to sell ourselves someday, because while we do want to sell out, we don't want to sell Easy Allies. I joke. But it's tough for us to not only know, compared to some of our competitors and contemporaries, how much we're worth, but enforcing that value. Us telling people, no, we're not going to accept that much money. We're going to raise the rates on you. We definitely didn't want to do that for our sponsors, even though that's something that we did consider every single time we looked at that goal list and looked at that reward list and figured, is this the time to maybe bump that up? Because we are getting more viewership numbers on our podcast, on the audio versions and the video versions. We are growing as an entity. If we do want to get bigger, surely that is something we're going to have to change at some point. And so was really refreshing when when Roost reached out and we first began meetings and conversations with Roost, and they said, you are worth it. You are, there is an easier way to do this. There is a way that we can then take your metrics, understand your business, understand what you guys do, and then translate that to the correct people so that we understand your worth. We can communicate your worth. We will take care of that stuff for you, because a lot of the stuff on the business side of it, we are absolutely happy to do, because there are a lot of facets to this business and there's a lot of things that need to get done for this business to operate. But that was just one of those things that all of us just kind of collectively looked around and were like, yeah, none of us went to business school. None of us took courses on this. None of us, can really, again, and I know I'm kind of a broken record about this, but not only know our value, but then again, be able to argue that value, be able to, turn down sponsors because they weren't able to pay enough, or, you change that, kind of felt like a landlord moving forward, change that value. So a lot of that stuff not only will happen by a separate entity, a lot of that stuff will happen behind the scenes. None of that stuff will just kind of go in and muddy up our Patreon. Our Patreon now, after this change, is going to be expressly focused on immediate rewards that you get based on those various tiers, based on your involvement. And that just feels so wonderfully pure and just so wonderful in terms of what we really wanted this Patreon to be when we first started it. But it is going to be weird. It's going to be weird for our patrons. It's going to be weird for my voice, apparently, because it just cracked. It's going to be weird for me reading a bunch of different names. I'm sure I'm going to stumble through those in the first couple podcasts, because it's going to be a whole menu of different names to read. And because there are a lot of people that miss out on the week-to-week goings-on of Easy Allies that don't watch Cup of Jones, that might miss a podcast or two. You're going to see a lot of comments from people going, wait a minute, what happened? Like, what did I miss? I was on vacation and I come back and they're reading different stuff on the podcasts. The Patreon took a little dip. I'm confused. So it's going to take weeks. It's going to take a couple months for us to communicate these things, for us to answer all of your curiosities moving forward. Again, very much looking forward to picking this back up in business questions next week, and possibly addressing things that I missed. Oliver Gritty asks, how long have you been working on this? And Bloodworth replies, since before the Phase 4 announcement. So this has been a long time that we've been talking about this. If you go back and watch the Phase 4 announcement, or you might remember us saying as such, there are things that we talked about. There are still things that we talked about in the Phase 4 development process that we have not had the time to finish development of. Prison of Love still coming. Together We RPG still coming. There's still some things that we are working on that will be very exciting in the future, and things that we haven't even announced yet. And this is one of those. But this was, and not only, have we been working with Roost for several months, but again, this is something that we've always talked about doing. This is something, not only is Ian Hink very excuse me, not only is Ian Hink very involved in working with Roost, Ian Hink was always that one who would raise his hand almost at every single meeting and be like, we got to move our sponsors away from Patreon. We have to really figure out how much we are worth, work with another company that knows that value and can enforce that, and basically hand off this responsibility to someone who is better at it. Obviously, we don't feel anyone is better at creating content for our audience than us. That is something that we want to continue to do. This will give us more opportunities, more time, less stress, just enable us more to focus on the things that we feel are most important to focus on in terms of bringing in new patrons, introducing new people to our content. So again, I want to reiterate, Rooster Teeth will have absolutely no ownership, no say, no percentage stake, nothing in Easy Allies. This is strictly, the same kind of relationship that if we had worked with a real estate agent to get our studio, if we'd worked with, lawyers to, form our LLC, if we worked with accountants to handle our taxes, it's literally just handing off, a business responsibility to someone else who is much better at doing it than we are, much more knowledgeable of our specific needs as a content creator, as a crowdfunded business, working with Patreon. But that being said, Rooster Teeth is a fun company. There are fun things that they do. And just going through this whole process at Roost has introduced us to many, many people that work at Rooster Teeth. Obviously, we work with, and are friends with a lot of people that have done business on all sorts of different avenues. So I can give you with absolute 100% assurance. Again, I'm very hesitant with saying the promise word. I absolutely promise that Rooster Teeth will never have any sort of creative say or anything that we do at Easy Allies. But just in working with them with merchandise, there might be other possibilities, other opportunities coming up. Just like I remember, one year we went to PAX, and Twitch invited us to have a panel at their booth and have a little meet and greet at their booth. We have not done that since, but that was a really incredible opportunity. And there were a lot of people that happened to be at PAX that, I met for the first time through that opportunity. Doesn't mean we're having weird backdoor shady deals with Twitch. Doesn't mean Twitch now has an ownership say. It just means they provided us opportunities to meet their community, to do things through them. And other opportunities might, open up in the future, just like merch, just like other things. The fact that we can, take advantage of those opportunities, whether we want to do them or not. The fact that we have created all these new business relationships, the fact that we're hopefully creating an awareness, introducing ourselves to a lot of people that we have not introduced ourselves to, and still retaining absolute complete creative control over our business. So much so that we can actually step away from so many of the uncomfortable responsibilities that we've had in the past and just focus on content is the greatest. So I know we were nervous in announcing this. I'm sure some of you are nervous about this announcement. This is something that, I don't think I would never expect any of you to be completely comfortable with until you see the benefits, until you see us actually moving forward in this transition and knowing that everything's gonna be okay. That a lot of potentially the things that were making you nervous were unfounded and not as big of a deal as you think they are. But we need to prove that to you, and I am looking forward to doing that in the coming months. And one of the ways that we can do that, again, as I said, is answering all of your questions and concerns. I've seen some really good pertinent ones pop up in chat today. But again, you feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Feel free to reach out, email me, Brandon at Easy Allies, to say thumbs up, thumbs down. Or of the comments that I've seen on Patreon, of some of the comments that I've seen on Cup of Jones today on YouTube, express concerns that I think are completely viable. I think are completely understandable for me, because I when we were going through this entire process, we really tried to separate ourselves from our business, separate ourselves from our personas, and really start to think, okay, if I'm on the outside looking in, how does this look to me, and what would my concerns be? So we want to take care of those. We want to answer all of your questions, and of course, we want this to be as smooth of a transition as it can moving forward. And hopefully I didn't talk about it too much. So let me just go through just to reiterate, let me go through all of our notes. We're joining the Roost Sales Network. We are not joining Rooster Teeth. This will affect our podcasts. Viewers, listeners will hear new sponsors moving forward, and we get to select them. We're probably going to take a dip during the transition, but we're anticipating it. It's okay. $1 patrons will have access to the ad-free version of the podcasts. Early access will function the same. The $1 patrons will get the ad-free version on Sundays when it goes live, public for everybody. We're adding a shout-out tier, so sponsors can still be involved if they want. Some sponsors have reached out and said that they are interested in that. This does not replace our need for your support. It's just a new piece to the puzzle. Big thanks to Ian for being our direct line of communication with Roost. And Roost will be handling our merch, so be sure to get out there to Fangamer and Spreadshirt and get that stuff if you would like to get it. I know some of the Spreadshirt, just speaking from experience, some of those Spreadshirt shirts can fall apart after a while. So maybe get a couple extras just to have if there's that one shirt that you really like. But there we go. Big announcement. If you are comfortable with this, if you're like, no big deal, that means a lot to us. As this company evolves, we will make decisions based on, how we want to change what we're specifically focusing on and who else potentially outside of us is focusing on things. A lot of times, like I was talking about, real estate agents, accountants, lawyers, you don't hear about those things. This handles sponsorship. This handles things that you will notice. And so we want to bring you in. We want to have you be involved. But if you are giving us the benefit of the doubt, I incredibly appreciate that. And I hope that we can continue to make you happy with the content that we produce here at Easy Allies. That's kind of the whole point of this thing. So there we go. Let's look at the schedule. And Bloodworth, let me know if I missed anything. Of course, just like everything else on Cup of Jones that felt incredibly rambly. Oh, and DVR setting. Boop, clicked on this one. I went through a whole new setup to kick open this version of Cup of Jones. Again, if you're listening to the audio version or if you're watching this after the fact, that doesn't concern you. Everything's DVR for you. But if you're watching this live, you can go back if you missed anything now. Hopefully that works. Let me know if it doesn't. Gundam building today, immediately after the stream, 11:30. I should wrap it up and get through these business questions as quickly as possible because that took me about half an hour to talk about all that stuff. Mysterious Monsters today at 4. Time Splitters 2, a shooter that I have played before but didn't play all of and have heard. It's just one of those games, one of those gems from the past that I hear a lot about. Time Splitters 2 will be our stream team game tomorrow. Tomorrow night, a stream that I am woefully unprepared for. I wanted to make a video for tomorrow, and I'm probably not going to have enough time. I might get some gameplay together. I think I might do a thing where I get gameplay of the game and then talk over the game. But I got my game already figured out, and I'm excited to debate it tomorrow at the 11th, I believe, Easy Allies Hall of Greats. For those of you unfamiliar, we all bring a game. We try to get it into our 2 games into our Hall of Greats. We shall see if I get it in. I've had a pretty good track record lately. Fingers crossed. Achieve It Yourself. New episode on Wednesday. We're getting near the end of the season. If you haven't seen the Bonk episode, which I believe is public for everyone now, I did see it on the website, so I believe everybody can check it out. Some really we're getting into my episodes, so hopefully you enjoy those. Wednesday and Thursday are big days. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which Huber is just like so freaking out about. It's really exciting to see Huber explore that game. I haven't played a lot of Zelda games, but I have played Majora's Mask several times. Pokemon Sword will be played by Don Casanova and Ian Hank. I know some people are reaching out to me. I am playing Pokemon Shield and played a little bit this weekend, but have primarily been putting my time into Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And if schedule permits this week, I want to get Michael Huber and Brad Ellis to do a spoiler mode for that. So hopefully we will deliver that as soon as possible, give you some time to get through that campaign. Thursday, Trials of Mana, weekly hunts, getting back to Pokemon Silver. It's going to feel odd. And apologies that we missed a lot of that stuff last Thursday because we had this bizarre power outage or internet outage. And so I feel bad because we were recording the podcast and we finished the podcast and our internet came back. And I knew I had to cut the podcast. I was like, oh, this is actually kind of great. I can go home. I finished the podcast by about midnight, where I usually finish it around 2 or 3 in the morning. And I was like, oh, sweet. I can get the podcast done early. And I started to get a headache. And Kyle was like, hey, we can stream Pokemon. And I was like, nah. I'm done. It's been a long day. So we will get back. It has been a 2-week absence. When we go through the art at the beginning of the Pokemon Silver stream, I'm going to be like, right, that was 2 whole weeks ago. And of course, all of you are playing, Pokemon Sword and Shield, or many of you. And so I want to finish Jedi Fallen Order so I can, dive back into Pokemon Shield and run around Galar and have all of my Pokemon opinions preloaded. We can talk about all of that and maybe finish. Probably not. It'll probably be the second to last episode of Pokemon Silver before we move on to another stream. New episode of Box Peak. If you haven't seen the last episode, it's the best one. Probably the best episode so far. When Kyle said he was going to separate the Box Peak into 2 seasons, my first thought was, that's a great idea, Kyle. That's a really smart idea about how to mitigate your stress that you're feeling having to put the show together. That'll get this show out in front of people's eyeballs before we had originally planned to do it. And I think that's a very smart decision. My second thought was, but episode 7 though. I remember going through all those scripts. I read through those scripts of Box Beat so fast when he sent me all of the scripts for episodes 1 through 10. And I was just like, flip. Wait, what? Went back a couple pages. Wait, what? That's episode 7, baby, if you haven't seen it. And along the Q&A as well. Getting close. That'll be episode 8. Only 3 episodes left of Box Peak. And then Blood Pact on Friday. Maybe Blood can say a little bit more about that in chat. But if you want to join, the Blood Pact tier, I don't remember what Blood is playing this month if he has announced it yet. And Friday, Kyle TBD. We don't know. We don't know what Kyle's playing. Kyle's very much involved in Box Peak right now. Maybe Kyle doesn't know what he's playing. But for those of you that hang out with Kyle on Friday nights, I don't know if what game he's playing is necessarily going to entice you or deter you from joining him on his streams and our podcast this weekend, Easy Update, and the Easy Allies podcast on Sunday, which again, we're wrapping it up. We're going to say goodbye to all of our sponsors at the end of the month. And then starting in December, we're going to have a whole new batch of sponsors and a whole new way that we handle sponsorship at Easy Allies. So there we go. Whew. So yeah, 11:30 is my cutoff. Let's get through business questions as quickly as we can. Alexander Zirianov, last time you said that you want to spend money on Box Peak promotion. I think that this isn't the best idea. Wait, hear me out. Imagine I never heard about Easy Allies, but saw Box Peak promo and got interested. What will happen after I watch the whole series? Most likely I'll browse the channel for more content like Box Peak, or subscribe for more such content in the future. The problem is that your channel has nothing else like Box Peak, and most likely never will have. Ouch. So I either leave you immediately or unsubscribe after a while because video game coverage is not what I'm here for. And Easy Allies will receive no benefits from my short-lived presence. As a brand manager, do you think that promoting Box Peak is a better investment than promoting, for example, Mysterious Monsters or the Easy Allies podcast? I do. I really think... I think the reason to advertise Box Peak is because it is for everyone. And again, I'm not doing the promise. I'm not saying that we are going to do this. This is going to be something that all 9 allies will have to agree on. This is something that we will have to budget and figure out if it is worth spending money on. But it's something that I've always been curious about because I think Box Peak is packaged for everyone. I think that, the little ones can enjoy Box Peak. I think that if you've grown up on Power Rangers, if you've grown up on Pokemon, if you've grown up on a lot of the action stuff, He-Man, even like Transformers, G.I. Joe, a lot of these silly cartoons from the 80s and 90s, a lot of that stuff is celebrated in Box Peak. And it's short, it's digestible, and what you're talking about in terms of advertising anything and then having people come to, if I advertise Mysterious Monsters, we don't have any other game shows, so boom, you're gone. If we advertise the Easy Allies podcast, our other podcasts are not like the Easy Allies podcast. They focus on Nintendo and film and more deep dives into specific gaming experiences, not necessarily the business. Easy Allies, the Easy Allies podcast really focuses on the business of video games. So if you're like, oh, this is a video game business channel, and then you go and like, no, man, we play Gundam, we like build Gundams for 5 hours. There is always that danger, I think, when you are advertising a channel, whether it is a YouTube channel or whether it is a television channel or whether it's something like Disney Plus, that if you're advertising one show and I go to enjoy that show, am I going to enjoy something else? And you say that, so I either leave you immediately or unsubscribe after a while because video game coverage is not what I'm here for, and Easy Allies will receive no benefits from my short-lived presence. We will definitely receive benefits from those presents. If we have people coming over and meeting us and then make the decision not to follow us anymore and to move on, I can't, snub my nose at those people. I completely understand. And I think we have basically got to that point after 3.5, almost 4 years of operation where we need to take that risk, where we need to bring people in that might not be into everything that we do. I don't think that, makes me want to have our content be more focused on one specific type of thing. And that doesn't make me nervous about advertising just one specific thing to a greater audience. I just look at everything that we produce at Easy Allies. I think if I was to make a trailer for something that was going to try to sell it, I think that not only has the greatest, mass appeal, but I think that and while you say that, Box Peak is not very similar to anything else that we produce. For, in a lot of ways, you're absolutely right. Box Peak is, definitely stands out, is very different, even from, some of the wonderful creative ventures that, Ian has done, like the Cowboy Musical. But I think it is still representative of who we are personality-wise. We are all in it. We all voice act in it. We're definitely fans of anime, definitely fans of Pokemon, definitely fans of a lot of the things that Box Peak celebrates. And so if you watch Box Peak and then come to Easy Allies and are immediately turned off because you were expecting something completely different. Again, I think that is the nature of advertising. I think if you are an advertiser, having an absolute 100% retention rate is like, having a pitcher having an absolute perfect record in baseball. Like, it's impossible. Like, you don't rate something on perfection, when it comes to performance like that. You rate something on, how high that percentage can get and how much you can increase that over time. And there, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, Alex. I'm just saying, who knows, man? Like, I think it's time to make that investment. I think it's time to figure that out. If we invest in Box Peak and it turns out to not move the needle, it turns out to not work out really well for us, then lesson learned. Then in the future, we'll consider, consider it much more carefully before we choose to invest money in advertising and choose to possibly advertise something else in the future. I don't want to talk too much about this again because I feel like I've said too much because, again, this is not something that we are slated to do. This has not been budgeted. This is just something that I have long considered because I look at Box Peak and I see something that I can literally just hand off to anybody. And that's long been a concern of mine that so much of our content, you need to know us, even the Easy Allies podcast. I've heard from a lot of people that, you tune into the Easy Allies podcast and we start corrections on an episode you haven't heard. Kyle does a bit that you're not necessarily into. And even if you're like, oh yeah, a gaming podcast, 15 minutes in, you're like, are they going to talk about games or what's going on? So there always is that danger of people coming in and us being not what they expected. Liquid Log Coloring. I've been really enjoying the Silver Squad streams, mostly because of the unique dynamic shared between you and Bossman. Bossman is the series veteran, and you is the series newcomer. For the next game, I'd like to recommend a shift in this dynamic. I posit Minecraft Survival Mode for your consideration. The short-term goal could be building a town, getting to the Nether, building a castle, etc. Not only would I love to see how Bossman creatively expresses himself in Minecraft, I think it would just be an all-around jolly stream. This time with you as the expert leading the way. Me as the expert? I haven't played Minecraft in a long time. Could also do wonders in expanding your YouTube audience. Who knows? I put it as a takeaway. That's my answer as well. Liquid Log Coloring. Who knows? Also, Liquid Log Coloring. Great name. Brandon K. Gann, slip into number 3 in the comments. Would EZA be interested in doing a 10 to 20 minute predictions video about what we could see announced at the Game Awards? Or is it too close and not appealing to do? Not asking about a betting special, but a sit down where as many allies would like, could talk about what they would like to see that Thursday night. It's just messy. It's just, the Game Awards is just something we like to just, it's like we're going to go and we'll do reactions to it. We'll celebrate it. But there are 3 primary problems with us guessing about the Game Awards, as I'm sure a lot of you know, and as Brandon Kagan addressed in the Patreon post. Brandon Kagan likes to abridge his question and just at the end of the comment just be like, this is all you have to post, and I appreciate that. 1, Kyle works on the Game Awards. 2, we are judges on the Game Awards. Yay! I don't think I've officially made that announcement, but thank you, Jeff Keighley, for bringing us back to be judges in the Game Awards. And 3, we worked with Jeff Keighley a lot. I've worked with Jeff Keighley a lot. We've worked with him in the past. I've been, involved. Kyle was involved in his YouTube show that he had for a while. I've been involved in his E3 coverage, whether I've been on camera in a chair or behind the scenes. Jeff Keighley was, the manager of game trailers, for a little over a year. And so, I have a long history with Keighley. We have a long history, with a lot of people that are involved in the Game Awards that a lot of you don't know. A lot of those are ex-Game Trailers employees, whether they are editors or managers or producers or tech people. There's just a lot of, it's kind of like some of the concerns that we brought up with Huber and Shenmue. We just want to have absolute, complete transparency. And I think that's just a really safe way to do it. That we're like, this is wonderful. It's a thing that happens. But it just feels like, actors doing predictions on the Oscars. It's just a little weird. So that's why we don't do that. I know that, again, if you brought in like a lawyer to literally look at like the fine print, you'd be like, oh, I don't really see anything here that's a breach of contract. But it's just a safe thing to do. But it's actually, bets will come up again as we get before the end of this episode. VG Junkie, game of the year is Child's Play. Have you guys begun planning for game of the decade? Yeah, we brought that up on Cup of Jones before. We've talked about it. Haven't made any official decisions there because we have the decade isn't over yet, and we haven't even begun to really officially discuss GOTYs yet. Also, I would come up with a brief spiel on Box Peak for those that haven't heard of it. It's a handmade cartoon-inspired comedy series featuring the Allies and produced by Kyle Bossman, etc. And tweet that out or drop mentions of it more frequently. The amount of time and effort put into the project seems disproportionate with the amount of tweets and name drops it gets. Plus, I think that by just saying Box Peak, most people don't get it unless they already know what it is. I can imagine newcomers looking at Box Peak Season 2 trailer and having zero clue what they're looking at. I agree. Again, that's why, I want to repackage it in a different way and resell it in a different way once it's done. Robert Cassidy, this may have been answered in the past, but how come Q&As and Community Showcase don't get uploaded to the audio feed like most other regular content? I understand that the Community Showcase has some visual elements that I'd miss out on in podcast form, but I generally don't have 3-ish hours to sit down and watch those shows anyway. This is something I'd like to see in the future, if it's possible. This has been recommended, I think, almost for every single piece of content we produce at Easy Allies to have some sort of audio version of it. The Q&As is interesting. Again, that's Ben Moore's project, so I will reach out to Ben and see if he's interested in doing that. Ben puts a lot of work into the Q&A, so I don't know how stoked he will be to just add a little sprinkle of work on top of all those other responsibilities. The showcase, I see what you mean, because the showcase is primarily comments. The comments make up like 65, if not 70% of the time that you're watching that. And there is also a lot of wonderful music that is produced within the Community Showcase that you can listen to. Two concerns, though, about the showcase. One, there's a lot of stuff where we're like, hey, look at that. And you address that, Robert, where it's like there'd be a lot of bits of the showcase that would be very strange to listen to because you would just hear us chuckling at something that you're not looking at. Also, I like the consistency of, if you go to patreon.com/easyallies, if you click on the Community Showcase tab under posts, it'll take you to every single Community Showcase episode, and there won't be anything in between. But whereas I think it was a definite bonus for our listeners of Cup of Jones to add an audio version to Cup of Jones, so I don't worry about having double posts, even though people do complain about that because we do audio posts with the video link now for all of our shows, with the exception of Cup of Jones. I can't do that for Cup of Jones because I don't have the audio version until I've made it, so it does automatically create 2 posts. I don't like the idea of having like an additional Community Showcase post that people would then get confused and maybe leave their posts on that instead, or get confused over where they're actually supposed to address things, or if they watch the Community Showcase and then it pops up later. I think that might get a little confusing, and again, just kind of like interrupt that really nice thread of all of the showcases month to month. But I'll think about it. Morgan Mohala, it feels like you and the Allies are too aligned at times in the long-form content, Frame Trap, and the podcast. Too aligned. I wish. Too aligned is not a I just did a Damiani face. Not a concern I've seen brought up a lot. Would you consider appointing or volunteering as a devil's advocate for future interesting topics that you would all probably agree upon? I feel like the brand manager or cynical boss man can present a point of view that provides a more robust conversation than everyone just agreeing. Of course, I don't want anyone to alter their true opinion, but I think that one-sided conversations are becoming more frequent as the allies become more and more attuned to each other. Interesting. This reminds me of something. Hello. I was just reading something that Blood said in chat, so I forgot. This reminds me of a lot of times when I've been reserved in posting on Twitter, because I will I'll be thinking of posting something and I'll be like, oh, I have a problem with that, or oh, I want to say something about that. And then I think, if I post something on Twitter, I have to be able to support that argument. And not only just with my opinions, but with my time. I have to be able to, and some people don't agree with this. Some people just post something on Twitter. And that's not the way I like to approach my followers on Twitter. If I comment on something and then they ask me to clarify, or they disagree and they want to open a conversation, I want to be available for that conversation. It's a hard lesson that I've learned on Twitter that I've definitely gotten flack over the years for not doing that sometimes. And so I definitely want to make myself available. So if I play devil's advocate all the time, and then somebody reaches out to me on Twitter and they're like, wait, you believe what? And I'm like, no, I don't believe that. I was just like pretending I did on the podcast. And they'd be like, wait, whoa, why would you pretend about something that serious or about that topic? Or why would you take EA's side in that argument? I'd be like, no, I don't. So I think that sounds like a lot of work, to consistently be the contrarian, to potentially, I do like a spirited argument. I do like a spirited debate, but this isn't debate class. Like, we're not there to debate. We're there to see how we agree on something. And so in the case of something like, I don't know, Google Stadia, it's fascinating to see how our opinions sort of evolve, how like throughout the evolution of the advertising of Stadia up into the product launch this week, how we all feel about that, how we continue to feel about that. Maybe if some of us drop out of being interested in that. But if you look at something as, it's just always been a debate because they're just playful that way, I think it takes away from kind of the truthfulness of how we feel. And I think maybe what you're seeing is kind of a more cautious observation of how to communicate with the other allies. We've kind of learned over time that there's a way, I think that's one of the reasons why, people say that they enjoy watching Bossman and myself. They think that we have a great dynamic. I kind of know how Bossman ticks now. I kind of know, when I'm joking with Bossman, when I actually want to make a point with Bossman, and the difference between those two. And I'm not sure a community would recognize that, or if that would be too much of a job to try to communicate to them after the fact if they saw us debate something, but then one of us wasn't actually being completely truthful. And I think it would just get repetitive and annoying if I would just make a point and then everyone on the podcast would look at me and I'd be like, devil's advocate. And they're like, Jones, you're always throwing devil's advocate out. It'd be an excuse. Anytime people disagree with me, I'd be like, devil's advocate? Andy Gergen, any chance of a spoiler mode for Terminator Dark Fate? Probably not. If not, did you see it? What'd you think? I didn't. I'll check that out later. I'm not terribly excited about Terminator Dark Fate. Sorry. I just think it looks weird. But Huber saw it. Huber dug it. Huber said, not what you think. That was Huber's review. He was like, not the movie you think it is. Wink, wink. So Huber's stoked. I'll bring it up, but I know that I can talk effectively about spoiler modes because at the beginning of every month, or rather the end of the previous month, we look ahead at all of the movies and games that are coming out that month and try to figure out, hey, what would, like Joker in October was like this. This seems like a spoiler mode that we should do. Terminator Dark Fate did not spark enough interest for that to be something automatically that we were going to do, but you never know. But I do not think it is on the schedule. Daniel Garza Andrade, Easy Allies has a big library of games. So how do the allies request a game to play? Do you sign something, fill out some form, or just say, I'm grabbing this? Does everyone have to agree on it, or just Bloodworth, the gamekeeper? Yeah, you just grab stuff. It was a bigger deal back in the Game Trailers days because we just had a much bigger library. And because with Easy Allies, we have an equal partnership. And so we are all partners of this in this company. And so we are all kind of equal owners of all of those games where none of us were owners of Game Trailers. And so none of us technically owned those games back at Game Trailers. We did have a log. Bloodworth was the gamekeeper back at Game Trailers. And when we had a game go missing, it was a bigger deal. With us, we just kind of, oh well, we'll pick up that game if we need it for an easy living or a group stream or something. And like I said, it's like three or four shelves of games. It's not as massive. I think back at Game Trailers we had like 20 to 30 shelves of games. It was insane. Happy Gaming. Does EZA have plans for a festive Thanksgiving video or stream? No. That's not something we've done in the past. I feel like most everyone should probably be taking the holiday for family. We will definitely do that. But maybe having a recorded rerun or stream, something to upload on the holiday that's cozy and good vibes, could be festive. Given the nature of the holiday, it would be fun to have each ally bring a small game they're thankful for, play it with someone, or just talk about it, sort of like a game feast or potluck. Doing so could spread some low stakes and relaxing positivity to combat the current contentiousness that is the game landscape today, especially close to GOTY discussions. This will be a weird GOTY. I definitely, and I will, it's way too late to plan for something like that right now, but food for thought for next year, food for thought for other holidays as well. And Blood concurs. The library we have now is not anywhere close to GT, kind of scattershot, not logged, etc. You can tell Blood's frustrated. He's like, it's not logged. Keeps me up at night. I kid. Beaten Down Brian, former Easy Allies podcast sponsor. Am I right in thinking that since EZA switched from stars to numbers a few years back, you have never disclosed what the numbers in your review scale equate to? Interesting. If so, why? And could you share it now or in the future? I just feel it's important for context when the numbers mean different things from every outlet. Beaten Down Brian, I gotta be perfectly honest. I don't know how to answer this question. I don't know what they should equate. They equate to stars. I know that they don't equal... we don't consider them a numerical equal to the numbers that you would probably associate them with. So, we did have half stars. So it did, potentially equate to a 10-point system as opposed to the 20-point system that we have now, where there are 20 potential scores that we could give a game. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if something got, 3.5 stars, that then equates to a 7 now. It's been so long since we've done stars that I'm very far removed from those conversations that we had at the time. And because it's something that it's been so long since we've done, like, I don't necessarily want to confuse the issue by, positing a guess at potentially what that means. To give you a straight answer, you would have to, that could maybe be a good question for the Q&A, because to give you a straight answer, we'd have to get all of the allies together, at least all 6 allies that review games, and try to figure that out. And Blood has absolutely no desire to log our current library. I didn't think so. But yeah, sorry. I mean, maybe email me with that one and we can talk about that offline. But I'm definitely much more in favor of the number system. I love the system that we have now. That is definitely a system that I prefer. So it's weird to ask to, being asked to tell you the equation that factored into a system that we don't use anymore and was not the system that I preferred. Gabriel Roy, I've been digging the pre-reviews, Need for Speed, Breakpoint, kinda, you guys have done, especially when you guys can be a little late with reviews now and then, and that's not a bad thing. Any chance of making it a regular thing? Here's some quick thoughts while we wait for a review, that sort of thing. Bloodworth replies, it's something we've been looking to do more of, but it takes the right game and the right circumstances for the schedules to align. Pokemon has potential, but we're already planning to do that for Frame Trap. Star Wars could maybe work, but would most likely be better to do a spoiler mode since it isn't super long. Similar to the Dev Showcase streams, it's just about finding that right convergence of all kinds of different factors, but I'm going to try to keep it in mind. I think Blood nailed it. That's basically it is a fun thing. There is a chance to make it a regular thing. We just don't want to make that promise because we never know how things are going to work out. There's so many factors. When we get the game, what other games that we're working on at the time, how we feel about that game. The stars might align that it's the perfect opportunity to do, kind of in the case of Ghost Recon Breakpoint. And I could have messaged, Huber and been like, hey, let's talk about Breakpoint. Huber had been like, no. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, I just don't want to. I just do not care about that game anymore. And whereas that would be its own opinion, or an opinion that could, a viable opinion that could be expressed in a video like that. We want all of those quote unquote stars to align, not to talk about stars after beating down Brian's comment, but, that, all of those kind of ducks have to be lined up in a row for that to make sense. But if you look at how we handled reviews a year ago, a year before that, it is different. It is a different vibe, and it is something that I think we will do moving forward. Potentially more often, but I don't know. Asbo Zapruder. Okay, so like, yeah, if I understood you, you wanted more rhymes. I mean, sure, why not? So, Phase 4 traded gaming for a plow, and you traveled to the past. Don't ask how, man. Would you stick to growing grains or drive some cattle through the plains? Would you choose to be a farmer or a cowman? I don't want to be a farmer or a cowman. Easy Allies is not a farmer or a cowman. Easy Allies is in Kansas City. Have you been to Kansas City? They've taken it as far as they can go. Henry Ramirez, did Amanda post her P.O. box anywhere? Yes, she posted it on both her Twitter account and her Instagram account. Both are Amanda_Troop, Troop as in Girl Scout Troop, TROOP. If you missed last episode of Cup of Jones, she jumped on and said she has a lot of stickers of this guy. If you're listening, I mean the dinosaur t-shirt that Jordy wears. She has a lot of those stickers that she made for Comic-Con a couple years ago. And if you would like one of those, you can send her a self-addressed envelope, a self-addressed sealed envelope. What is it? It's like Sasso or something. She like abbreviated it, and I was like, what does that mean? She's like self-addressed sealed envelope, and I'm like, oh, a Sasse or something? I don't know. But yeah, so if you want to check out that information, I think primarily on Instagram is where she listed the specific details about how that would work. Daniel Ribeiro, can you please say what's the cutoff time for posting questions in Cup of Jones, or post a message when you finished collecting all the questions? Fair. I thought I had mentioned that in the Cup of Jones posts. I do mention that whenever we put up the post for the community showcase. I say that it's the same thing for the showcase. It's the midnight Pacific time before that episode airs. So in the case of Cup of Jones, about 10 hours before Cup of Jones is set to air. But in the case now of dealing with Milo, my baby boy, sometimes I'll be up at 4 a.m. and I'll be like, hey, let's work on Cup of Jones now. So sometimes I do take questions after that, but I will make sure to include that in the description. And if I get a chance to leave a comment on Cup of Jones and be like, hey, got the comments, just FYI, if you leave anything past this. I'm a little nervous about doing that because comments have been known to disappear, so I don't want to leave it just on that comment. Again, it's there's a disclaimer on every single Cup of Jones post that lets you know how it works. So I will make sure to include it in that. G the Finger, with recent podcast discussions regarding the worth of worldwide brands and how merchandise is the largest contributor to the equity, we got to talk merch again. You've rightly stated that the main reason EZA isn't more aggressive in the merch game is the lack of willing labors. The question is, what's that threshold? When do you say, I know you don't want to do this, but it's your job? Well, that's a much bigger question than just merch. While not a guaranteed silver bullet, merch can greatly increase your annual revenue and awareness. So what will it take before it becomes a mandate, if ever? Joining the Roost Network. Ta-da! Yay! I copied that question. I was like, yay, I've preloaded an answer for that one. It doesn't happen often on Cup of Jones. That said, G the Finger, you might not be overly ecstatic with where our merch offerings are at the beginning of 2020, but making this step is an effort to make it more prolific, make it more something that benefits us financially and gets the word out. Brand manager, all the stuff you're talking about. If you don't feel we've done it, let me know. Me123, M-H-E-E, Mehe 123. I understand that reviews are the lifeblood to any gaming network. Some. What's Good Game doesn't do reviews. Unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of reviews. However, I am a big fan of your Ghost Recon impressions because you were able to get more in-depth, similar to a small frame trap discussion. Here's my concern. When I heard that Huber was in conflict with himself with Shenmue 3 on reviewing the game or not, I also noticed that he'd rather soak in Shenmue 3 with his own time rather than crunching it for the main public. If that's the case, wouldn't it be better if he took his own time and just do a big old stream of Shenmue 3 at a later date of his choosing? The last time Huber did a Shenmue 3 stream, everyone had a blast. Rushing through Shenmue 3 sounds like a bad idea. If anything, it ruins the outright experience! Exclamation point. Maybe people might disagree with me, but I would rather Huber be happy and have him take his sweet time with Shenmue 3 rather than getting a rushed out review. We would also rather Huber be happy with Shenmue 3. That is the ultimate goal. If Huber comes to us and says, actually, I want to review it, we'll be like, go for it. He'll be like, it's been a month since the game came out. We're like, doesn't matter. Get that review up. If he's like, hey, I'm not going to do an impressions video. I'm not going to do a review. I'm just going to do a stream. We'll be like, great. If he's like, I'm not going to do a stream for whatever reason because now I've played the game, I'm going to do an impressions video instead. Huber basically gets a blank check to do whatever he wants with Shenmue 3. I just think there's just opportunities like that come up, relationships that certain allies have with games, and we definitely want to give them the freedom to, sometimes, again, as I know you don't want to do this, but it is your job, as quoted by G the Finger. Sometimes that does come up. Sometimes there is a priority over something that we feel is more important. But we never want an ally to be visibly frustrated with how they are, shackled in their coverage of a particular game. As evidenced by, Ben producing Don't Skips, Ben has a lot of freedom in terms of, the games that he chooses for Don't Skips, because that in turn creates the best episodes of that show. So we want Huber to cover Shenmue 3 how he wants to cover it. But man, that is a topic that I don't think has missed a single episode of Cup of Jones. People are very concerned with making sure Huber can cover Shenmue 3 how he wants to. And gosh darn it, he will. Dennis M., with our final question. At the beginning of the year, you said you definitely want to do more bets or even betting specials again, but the reality is that it only ever happens once a year at E3, which is a bummer because the payoffs are always EZA at its peak, and it's getting rarer and rarer these days. Where are the concerts? The concerts? Oh, right, the concerts because of bets. The trials, the dioramas, the paintings, the stand-ups, the nutrition wraps, and so on and so forth. I miss stuff like that. I feel like you missed too many opportunities with things like Nintendo Direct, State of Plays, Gamescom, Tokyo Game Show, Paris Games Week, the Game Awards, etc. You are literally quoting me at the beginning of the last betting special. And that's the thing about that conversation at the last betting special. That wasn't me playing a character. I say this all the time. I say this to Huber and Bossman. We collectively as a group say this to the two of them all the time. And I don't want to throw the two of them under a bus, but it is the same thing again when I was talking about how we're going to handle the sponsorship reads in each of the podcasts moving forward. Kyle and I have our idea about how we'd like to handle that in the Easy Allies podcast, but it's up to Ben how he wants to do it on Frame Trap, Damiani on Friend Code, and Ian on Reaction Shots. And so whereas we can recommend and hope that people do things, I really think, as evidenced not only just by my own opinions, but observations of the allies at work, that the more we force allies to do things they don't want to do, the more we get subpar content. The more you can kind of get a taste of it. You can kind of, something's going to smell right here. Something, it feels like this was forced. It feels like this was they're only doing this. Obviously, we joked at that in doing the betting special, where I basically forced them to do that. Otherwise, I was going to make the channel nothing but baby videos, which I'm still trying to do, unfortunately. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this, asks Dennis. As I said, I enjoy EZA as is, but having more bets would make my EZA experience perfect. I think for every single patron we have of Easy Allies is just shy of perfection. I'm sure there's a lot of people that crowdfund us. There's a lot of people that watch our content, that make a commitment to supporting us and to being involved in Easy Allies, that are, bummed that we don't do bets as much as we should, that are bummed that we had to say goodbye to Game Sleuth and Tabletop Escapades, that are, bummed that I stream Cup of Jones instead of doing, a pre-recorded episode. There are a lot of changes that we've had to make over time. There's a lot of things that shifted, moving away from the garage into the studio. And whereas bets is something, and when you bring this up, I do think like, oh yeah, we do a lot less of that than we used to. But we also do much more of so many other things that I think are not only good for our business, good for our channels, but encourage the allies to be creative, to think outside the box, to create new content, and be proud of the work that they do. And so I think when this comes up, it's really just a conversation of us being like, hey, Huber, Bossman, are you doing it? And both of them just say, I just don't feel that there's time. I'm working on something else, or I just don't feel, I don't want to set a precedent that we will do bets for every state of play. Because if we do bets for a state of play and then the next state of play comes around and we don't do bets, we'll definitely hear it from our community. And so I think those two gentlemen feel a definite amount of pressure, and it's something that the rest of us don't want to take over bets because we've never done that before. And so I don't think you want a Jones betting special. I've never been interested in betting. I don't think you want a Bloodworth betting special, but you really want, the people that, pioneered those efforts, that created those shows. You want those people involved. And sometimes those people are working on other stuff. So, but I think Do More Bets is kind of one of maybe the top 10 most common recommendations on Cup of Jones and elsewhere of ways that we can improve Easy Allies and ways that we can give our patrons what they want. Takeaways, maybe Minecraft survival mode after Pokemon Silver. What would we play that on? I know people would want us to play Minecraft probably on PC, but I wonder. I've gone back and replayed Minecraft so many times. Should Community Showcase and the Q&A be uploaded as audio files to Patreon? I'm not super excited about changing Community Showcase in that way, but I will address that to the other allies, and specifically Ben Moore, who produces and hosts the Q&A, and whether he's interested in doing that. And hopefully we've answered a lot of those other things. Hopefully we have answered a lot of your concerns. My voice is very dry. Hopefully I've addressed as many of your concerns as possible following the announcement that we made this morning. It was wonderful via Twitter and via Patreon to see a lot of support from our allies, to see a lot of people, even people that weren't super comfortable with it. They were like, I'm a little nervous about this, but I'll give it time. I really appreciate that. Again, if you're watching this right now, if you're watching this live, you are a paying patron of Easy Allies. And so, of course, we're incredibly appreciative of your support. But when it comes to supporting Easy Allies, when it comes to us feeling, that you have our backs, it's not just, financial support is just one factor of it. A major factor in, how you make the sunshine through our windows and make rainbows appear in the sky for us is the fact that we can make these weird changes, that we can make decisions that we know will create just a fair amount of concern and turmoil in our community, but we feel is the best step moving forward. And if you can just, have patience, help us see something through, take advantage of the avenues that we have provided for you on Patreon, communicating with us on Twitch, to express your concerns, to ask questions, to demand clarity when it comes to all of these changes, then we are here to provide that. We are here to answer those questions. And we are excited to see how Easy Allies evolves moving forward with this relationship and what this will mean for our business. And this is just the beginning of it. So this will be something that we will definitely talk about much more in future episodes of Cup of Jones. But in 8 minutes, you'll definitely want to tune in to twitch.tv/EasyAllies. And that is it, folks. That is your episode of Cup of Jones. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful week. I will see you tomorrow night when I bring my game for the Easy Allies Hall of Greats. And hopefully I get it in. Cheers, everybody.